Hello and welcome to the Emperor's New Podcast, where we explore every corner of the Emperor's New Groove universe. Today I am joined by my first time on the podcast co-host, Ciarán McHugh.
Hey, how's it going?
And we have a very special guest today. He was an animator on some of your favorite Disney movies, including Hercules and Atlantis. He was a director on The Replacements, and he directed the fan short Superman Classic. And of course, relevant to this, he was a story artist and reference animator for The Emperor's New School. Please welcome Robb Pratt.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
Woo.
So how did you get your start in animation?
You know, it's funny. There's so much in our lives. It's like hard work and luck too, right?
Yeah.
And there's bad luck and there's good luck, and you just, you work and try to find the good luck. I was born pretty humbly, like I single mom. She suffered from mental illness. We were on welfare together, but we were in North Hollywood, and we were just like a stone's throw from the Walt Disney Studio, and that gave me a big bullseye to aim for. And I knew from an early age, watching Bugs Bunny cartoons and Disney cartoons. I was in kindergarten telling friends, when I grow up, I'm going to be an animator at Disney. I just clearly knew what I wanted to do. And, like you brought up Superman. I love comic books too, but that was just one discipline. It was just drawing.
Yeah.
And when I watched a Bugs Bunny cartoon, it was performance, voice performance, music, layout. It was all these different arts coming together to create one thing. And I knew that was for me. I wanted to be part of that. And so, so hard upbringing, but then lucky too, that I knew what I wanted to do and I was in the right place to do it.
Right. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So then growing up too. So like I said, we were really poor. So by the time I knew what CalArts was, there was no chance that I was going to go there. Forget about it. And that's unlucky. But then the lucky part, North Hollywood was right in my hometown of North Hollywood. That's what the headquarters for our union, our cartoonist union. And I would ride my bike past it and I'd see cartoonist union, but I didn't fully know what it was. And then I found out as I got older, oh, that's like the union headquarters. And I see a pamphlet and there's night classes. And you didn't get a degree, but I found out, oh, you're learning from like Disney animators or whomever that they want to earn a few extra bucks, so they'll teach a class at night. And they were affordable, so I could take those. So I was starting to take those, I think right after high school. I was still on a bike, still riding my bike there and going.
Nice.
And you got like an introduction to the industry. They kind of gave you a brief history of the industry. And you could, all the different disciplines, like there was a storyboarding module, there's an in-betweening module. And then again, lucky timed, right? Because right around this time, Little Mermaid was a huge giant hit. And then Beauty and the Beast was even bigger. And then Aladdin was even bigger than that. And so they were hiring, Disney was seeing like, oh, all this success, let's piggyback our productions. Instead of doing one at a time, we can have two going and have a movie every year. So they kind of needed a whole second staff really of people. And so I took the in-betweening class, and gosh, I think my teacher was Ruben Aquino, who famously had animated Ursula the Sea Witch in The Little Mermaid. And
Ooh.
So I was learning from him, and then you would get little inside info, like what's going on at the studio? Well, we're making a movie called The Lion King, and it's got a villain named Scar, so you can guess what's on his face. And, so you got little inside info and like, oh, are they hiring? And well, looks like they're going to be hiring a lot of people. So I got really, proficient at in-betweening and started animating my own stuff, even though back then there was no downshoot or a computer I could work with. I was just pretty much making flipbooks for myself and just understanding how in-betweens worked. And then I called the studio, I'm just a kid still. And, I had gotten some freelance. You go to the classes and you meet other friends.
Yeah.
And a
naturally.
friend of mine was getting work at Don Bluth, which is, Don Bluth famously was an animator for Disney in the 70s, broke off, made his own studio, mainly established mainly was set in Ireland, but had a small little studio out here.
Where I'm from.
Yeah, he's
all right. Excellent.
Yeah.
And so I got a little bit of freelance on Thumbelina doing in-betweens. And so now I had a little bit of confidence that I kind of knew how it worked a little bit. And I phoned up Disney and I said, hey, are you looking for in-betweeners? Because I just worked for Don Bluth. And they said, well, we'd like you to take a test. And well, a test? I already have worked for Don Bluth. Isn't that enough? Well, we need to know if you're good enough for Disney. I hung up the phone. I was so intimidated. I was scared because I was a kid. And I waited a few more months and practiced more and more, and then got confident again. And this time I called knowing that they're going to want me to test. And then they invited me to take a test. And it was an 8-hour test. I took it, and then I got hired on Pocahontas. And the thing I will always kick myself, if I had done it a year earlier, I would have been on Lion King, and I would have been a great claim to fame, and I blew it. I missed it. But you learn from that. You learn, don't let opportunities go by, and don't just think that the bus is going to come. If you miss this bus, you'll catch the next one. You got to, seize every opportunity.
And of course, I remember at the time, I mean, I wasn't born yet, but I remember from, learning about it at the time, that because I was born in 94, so I was born right when Lion King came out. I remember, well, shortly after, I remember that they thought Lion King was going to be the little film and Pocahontas was going to be the big film.
That's right, because Glenn Keane was like the superstar at the studio, and I think everybody wanted to be with Glenn Keane on his project.
Yeah.
And Lion King had superstars on it too, but Glenn was just so, come on, he had just animated Ariel and the Beast, and I think that's where everybody thought, that was the place to be. And then Lion King could kind of go a little bit under the radar, and ends up being the biggest 2D movie they ever did.
And it's probably aged a bit better.
Yeah. I think that's fair. It's hard to beat Talking Animals, right? So Talking Lions is pretty cool.
Pretty much, yeah. To jump in real quick, because you bring up, like, you started out as like an in-betweener artist. As a novice who doesn't know the inner machinations of animation, but is just like, very basic, and I like how the drawings move, how does the in-betweening process work?
Right. Yeah. For hand-drawn animation, right, it's a very tedious process, and it's kind of established since the advent of motion pictures that it's 24 frames to make 1 second of movement. So if you want fluid movement, you have to make 24 drawings. So, and there are little cheats. Sometimes you can hold a drawing longer. Sometimes you can expose a drawing to you expose it for 2 frames exactly. Yeah. And then you're on 2s. But if you want to do full Disney, luscious, beautiful animation, a lot of times it's 24 drawings for that 1 second. So the animator will draw the main poses that will describe the movement and the performance, but maybe, not do every single drawing. Sometimes the drawings are close together and they can already see that the performance is going to work. And so once the animator has done all that hard work of, I figured out the performance, but I've only done half of the drawings, I can hand this to an assistant or an in-betweener. It's funny that it's that antiquated name, to do the in-between drawings. So you get these drawings from the animator, and they'd be little charts where this is drawing 1, and then this is drawing 5, but I want a drawing 3 to go in the middle. We're going to be on 2s, and it'll go 1, 3. They'd have little charts for you to read, and then you'd have to put a pose, if it's a walk and the foot's in the air, but on the next drawing, the foot's on the ground, you have to do the pose in the middle. That will make those two, that movement connect. And then you learn from the animator. You kind of, if you love this stuff, and I do, and maybe growing up poor benefited me because I was so hungry for knowledge. I would stay late. I lived at the studio. The studio was better than my crummy apartment anyways. And I would study these charts, what is going in the thinking. There'd be an exposure sheet back then where you'd have lined paper, and each line represents a frame of film. And you would see how it's timed, how the drawings that are already completed are filled out on that sheet. And then you fill out the missing ones once you've added them. I was just like studying, because maybe I learned from that missed opportunity on Lion King. Like, I'm in here now, and I don't know how long this is going to last.
Make every moment last.
Yes, I didn't get a college degree, but if I can get out of here with a degree of Disney animator, that would be kind of cool. And I didn't foresee CG coming and wiping us out in a few years, but I thought even then, these things go in waves. I don't know how long these are going to be popular and how long they're going to keep doing 2 at a time. Maybe they'll scale back to 1 at a time. I've got to get my title in this whatever window I have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, some of your films that you worked on include Tarzan. I believe you worked on Hercules.
Yes.
And Atlantis as well. What was it like
Mhm.
working on those?
Man, I tell you, it was just heaven. I wanted to do it for the next 80 years if they would have let me. It was just great. The emphasis was on quality. How do you make this better? Always looking at better. And if there was any rivalry between artists, it was friendly. We looked at each other's work, and you didn't get jealous. You
Yeah.
got inspired, and you wanted to, like, oh, well, look what they're doing. I want to do better. I want to do better. And it was always better, better, better. And the movies were doing well. There was always, I mean, the work itself was rewarding,
Yeah.
but then the success, there'd be like, oh, Pocahontas broke 100 million US, party. There'd be parties and it was fun. And you're surrounded by like-minded folks. Everybody there wanted to be there since they were a little kid, basically. And now we're all together. And gosh, my time at Feature, at least, I'm still with the company, but my time at Feature ended in 2003 after Home on the Range. That's 20 years ago. I still run into these animators and we talk like no time has ever passed. It's like having another extended family. We really bonded over the experience and we all loved it so much. It was painful when it ended. But it was really just like, and at that time too, especially, imagine being on Pocahontas. I missed Katzenberg by 1 month. He had left and started DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen just a month before I started. And I would hear about, Katzenberg and how he ran it, but they hadn't put out a film yet. Pixar hadn't put out Toy Story yet. So you were undoubtedly the king of the mountain when you were at Disney Feature at that time. No question.
Yeah.
And so I even remember, I'd go to, when I went to orientation, my first time walking on that main lot, this historic main lot. And it wasn't just the first time I was walking on the Disney main lot. It was the first time I wasn't poor anymore. And they gave you the whole history of the company and the pillars of the company and what it means to be there. And then I remember having lunch with some of the folks that were kind of like, maybe they were getting hired for more finance jobs, maybe not art necessarily. Yeah. And they were a little cynical and they were kind of laughing at the presentation of getting pixie dust poured on us. But at the table, I went, no, like this is the best place in the whole world. I mean, this is where they made Snow White, Mickey Mouse. These are things that people all over the whole world, you could go in the deepest, darkest jungles of Africa. And if you're wearing a Mickey Mouse shirt, they would know who that is. Yeah. This is amazing. And I kind of inspired the whole table around me. They all started like going, wow, you're right. It's a really cool place. So I just loved it. And I never wanted to leave. I bought my animation desk, on my way out the door because I wanted to hold on to that desk. And I still animate on it and still work on it. It was just, it's just like it's a hard thing to describe. It was just so incredible.
You had to be there pretty much.
Yeah. And I feel so fortunate that, again, like maybe that this will be the theme to the interview. I don't know, but there's bad luck and good luck. And it's sad that it ended, but I'm also so lucky at my age that I got to get a little piece of rolling the drawings between my fingers and drawing that tactile animation. Yeah. And yet when it all switched to digital, I was young enough that I could adapt. I think had I been 10 years older, it might have been hard to adapt.
Yeah.
And had I been 10 years younger, I would have never gotten that feeling of rolling drawings and drawing with a pencil. And I remember bringing my sister for a tour of it. And we noticed how quiet it was and we listened and we could hear everybody in their cubicles rolling the drawings. It was awesome. It was just the greatest. And for a while, if I wore a crew jacket, like Hercules crew jacket at a market, people would ask for my autograph. It was like getting treated like a movie star. It was just so great. And just the huge effort and seeing it come together. I'm so proud of the movies. They look so beautiful. And sometimes, I'll let a year or two slip and I won't see it. And then, gosh, it was before Disney Plus. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago. Netflix was airing Atlantis, and I hadn't watched it in a while. And the studio was kind of down on that movie when it came out. So yeah, in our hearts, we weren't thinking it was this great thing. And I'm like, oh, I haven't watched it in a while. I put it on. I went, oh my God, no, this thing is awesome. It's just so great. I think just the bar was so high and the expectations were so high that people were maybe let down by that one. Yeah. But boy, the quality is there. It's really good. And Michael J. Fox is so great.
A lot of those 2000s movies, they really just didn't know how to market them.
Treasure Planet, poor victim of like timing, like wise, because they put it out the same time they had the first Harry Potter and
Yeah.
like
I think it was
Santa
the
Claus
second Harry
2.
Potter, but
Was it the second?
Yeah.
yeah. I think I have a weird thing. I remember years of movies coming out. So yeah, I'm pretty
Oh
sure it
yeah,
was the
same
first
here,
one
same
came out
here.
in 2001 and the second one came out in 2002.
I think
That
too,
makes sense. Yeah.
Or at least
we
here
were
it did.
all
Mm,
we were all kind of seeing the writing of the wall too once Toy Story came out, and then
Yeah.
Harry Potter was a behemoth, right?
yeah.
But we all kind of knew, yeah, maybe the excitement for what we were doing was waning,
Yeah.
Kind of like I said, I knew what happened eventually, but I didn't know it was going to be a CG thing that helped it along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the
I
same
would.
time, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to say when Toy Story was done, they showed it at the Disney studio for us. And I can't remember which friend of mine it was. We walked out of the theater and my friend said, "Well, we'll all be out of work." And I was like, "No, it looks different enough. It's like a different thing. If anything, stop motion's gone, but they'll still want moving drawings."
There was another. It was live action at the time. The combined with CGI a couple years earlier, a movie that you all may have heard of that would have been perfect for someone to say that, and then someone else respond, "Don't you mean extinct?"
Oh my God.
Right, yeah.
Because I think Jurassic Park really also paved the way, even though, at the time, when Jurassic Park came out, I don't think many people besides the people at Pixar who were working on Toy Story probably really thought of the idea of an entire movie that's computer animation. But like there was only like a year in between them.
Yeah.
So it was
Pretty
like,
much, yeah.
And then maybe even the bigger eye-opening thing is, this is, again, I love history. I'm wearing my Indiana Jones shirt. I love it because I love
I
history.
noticed, yeah.
yeah.
And history's fascinating, and it's good to know history because then you can kind of chart where things are going. But historically with animation, it was always a losing proposition. Hardly anybody ever made money off of animation. It's so labor intensive. It takes forever to make. That's why you have to sell toys, because it costs so much to make a movie. It's hard to recoup. So historically, really only the Disney studio could have repeated success. And other studios would try. Don Bluth had a few, but soon, couldn't keep it up. The Fleischers went out of business trying to do features. So it's really like a losing proposition for everybody except Disney. And so then when Toy Story came out, you're like, well, that's a huge, big hit, but probably only Pixar can do it. But then when Shrek came out, and that was a huge hit. Oh, okay, another studio can do it. Oh, and then Ice Age came out. Oh, a third studio can do it. This is a different animal.
And by the time 2D animation was like almost on the way out, then Illumination came in with Despicable Me. It's like, God, how many more of these are going to show up? Like,
well, now just not anybody can do it, but like there's, and what I was going to say is, as an animator, an indie animator in general, the advance of the internet and everything allows people to connect more and learn more. And now both independent and studio animation is pretty much everywhere of all sorts of kinds. And I think that's really cool.
That is exciting. There was a corny car commercial, but I loved it, by, I think, Cadillac, that said, "The greatest things start in a garage. Walt Disney started in a garage," and it showed Kingswell Avenue. Apple started in a garage. It showed that garage. The Ramones started in a garage. And it's like, no, they make a good point. It's those independent small groups that make like the really cool creative stuff. Disney Plus just had that documentary series on Light and Magic, George Lucas creating that company. It's just like a handful of people, super creative in a small area. It's not corporate yet. And that's where all the creative, awesome stuff gets done.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, as a fan of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that's like the exact same thing with like Eastman and Laird were just like making comic books about like whatever it is they liked and incorporating these wacky characters into it. And like, it wasn't corporate. It wasn't like,
it was underground, right?
It was underground. It was like an independent comic book, and it like started like a huge boom in terms of like indie comics, because back then, like, sorry to go off on a tangent about Ninja Turtles, but
I get it.
We go on tangents all the time on the podcast.
Oh yeah, but like, what is it? Like, when it came to comic books at the time, like, you either had to work with Marvel and DC or Dark Horse, and when you would make a character for them, the company owned the character. Like
Yeah.
you didn't really
Yeah.
get much credit for it. Whereas here were these two guys just chilling in an apartment one evening, like drawing turtles with nunchucks strapped to their like legs, and
Yeah.
it's just like, hey, it's a ninja turtle, and it's like, let's turn this into a story, and it became a huge success, and now it's like
Yeah.
a huge global franchise with a brand new movie just
That was
out,
a great
and
movie too.
That's awesome.
excellent movie. Yeah,
I hope we're all, there's like some cool stuff being made in small places right now that we just haven't seen yet that are going to just blow our minds.
I hope some of that stuff is being made by me.
Yeah, that's the
I
spirit.
hope to be
I'm
a
gonna
part
try
of some
too.
of that stuff as well.
Yeah, that's the spirit. We got to do it.
Did you have any another question you wanted to ask, Ciarán?
Yeah, actually, I did have another one because I was curious because looking through was it Rob your IMDb credits specifically like on character animation, like it mentioned like you animated for Kerchak on Tarzan and
Yeah.
Milo on Atlantis The Last Empire, Mrs. Calloway on Home on the Wage. I was
Yeah.
curious, how do animators get assigned what shots they work on or like what characters they're assigned? Is it like just a situation of the animators pick out like, oh, I want to do that character or I want to do that shot looking over the script? Or is it just the animation director is like, okay, you do this one shot of Ariel or so on?
Well, yeah, it is a team sport, right? And whenever one of our productions ended, we had to submit our reels again, and we called it the baseball trades. And if there was two shows that were staffing up, all the kind of like casting an actor, they would cast the lead like the directors would get the gig, and so now they're staffing, and they'd go, oh, Philoctetes, oh my God, Eric Goldberg would kill it as Philoctetes. And so they would kind of cast the lead animators.
Yeah.
And then those leads then would pick their teams based on footage, right? So it's fun to, one thing that was great about being on Kerchak, he doesn't have all the footage that Jane or Tarzan has, much less footage. So it's only three fellas on that character. And you really feel like, wow, I'm one third of it. Bruce Smith was the lead, and he's more than a third, just him. But you felt like you're part of a smaller team. What was great when I first got hired, I was still in cleanup where you're not animating the performance, you're cleaning up the drawings.
Yeah.
But I knew how to do the thick and thin line. And I got on the other side, on the cleanup side, they put me on Pocahontas because Pocahontas was the lead character and required the largest team and could probably absorb a newbie like me because it had probably 20-25 people just cleaning her up, not even just the rough, counting the rough animation.
Yeah.
But so everybody cast that way. They would look at portfolios, and if they called it baseball trades, they probably were taking turns picking. I'm not sure. I wasn't in those meetings, but that's kind of how it is. And then so your lead is in charge of that character. And that's one thing that was awesome too. You're working at Disney. These characters are very complex. They're very difficult to draw, and you need to squash and stretch them, and you need to show them from every angle. So you just had to master the one character. You could really, and even then it was difficult. And so the lead animator would then meet with the director of the movie. They'd look over the reel and the shots, and then they would cast like, okay, well, Rob's kind of new. Let's give him where Kerchak's tiny on screen, and then they would cast where they thought you could succeed, and that's kind of how it works or worked. And then it was funny because I say the characters are so hard to draw. You would draw for a year, and then the movie was done, and by then you're like, all right, I know how to draw Hercules now. Let's go. Like, oh, it's over.
That's what they all definitely the story I've heard from both animators I've interviewed and watching documentaries on animation. Both Tony Bancroft in an interview I did, and I recently also revisited, got to catch up with him and watch Once Upon a Studio for the podcast.
I listened to some of that.
He said that, well, now I really know who Kronk is if they wanted me to do the character again. And unfortunately, he was disappointed that Kronk is in Once Upon a Studio, but for some reason they didn't assign Tony Bancroft to him. And I don't know why.
Well,
that's a shame. I don't
but
know
I
either.
also remember in the Sweatbox, Andreas Deja, which is kind of a sad thing because he's talking about this version of the film that he didn't end up making. He didn't, because he left, saying, and then once you're done with the movie and you put the pencil down, that's when you really feel like you could begin. So it's definitely a very common feeling.
Yeah, that's funny.
And of course, even though you did not work on the movie because you were working on those other movies at the time, you got to do storyboards and some reference animation for The Emperor's New School.
Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah, and if you do want to talk about Emperor's New Groove, I was on the periphery. I was on Atlantis. I have friends that were on it, and I could go to the screenings and hear everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't get a piece of that movie. But then I got a second chance when 2D kind of got shifted away from the studio, because that's the nicest way to say it.
Yeah.
I had to reinvent myself, and I got into story, and but not story at feature. That was everybody, all the animators were getting laid off, and a lot of them were trying to get into the what few remaining story positions they were, and I just couldn't get in there. But I did go to television, and in a way, maybe that was better for me, because the pace of TV is fast, and you learn fast, because in features, you'll board the same sequence, get notes, go board that sequence, get notes, board that sequence. And depending on how the notes go or how the writing goes, you could be on a sequence for months. In television, every 6 weeks, you got a new episode. And it's like, oh, I screwed that one up, but I'll just be better on the next one. You just learn faster.
Yeah.
And one thing that was great is the producers on Emperor's New School knew that I was coming over from feature, and they treated me like a prince. They were really wonderful to me. And so I got to board on that, and then they would ask for, for the opening title sequence, can you fit in like doing some animation? Yeah, that'd be a pleasure. And I got the style of movement. I grew up probably more on Bugs Bunny than I did on Looney Tunes more than I did on Disney, and his kind of more of a Looney Tunes kind of movement.
Yeah.
So I love doing that, and it was a lot of dances, which it's funny, I can't dance, but then I became like the dance guy in TV, because I animated the hot dog dances for Mickey Mouse Clubhouse too.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
That was one of my favorite assignments. And what was funny is that we need 5 dances from all of them. We need them this week. I got to do one a day pretty much then. Is there reference? No, you got to make up what they do. Like, so I had one day for each one of them to make a cycle. So they're real simple dances, but it was super fun. Yeah. But that also was coming from, also doing, doing that stuff on Emperor's New School. Every time he had to dance, that was difficult. Like, oh my God, he did that breakdance move where you put the palm on the ground and you spin around your palm, and then go on the other palm. And oh my God, that was really hard. I had to watch videos and do it, but I would get those kind of assignments for TV show, which was kind of rare, because most of the animation was done at an outsourced studio.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I was so, I love this stuff so much. So I would do my storyboards, my 6-week assignment. And then if they needed animation, I'd go, hey, all right, I'll do it. I'll work overtime. I'll work on the weekends, and I'll work at night, because I just love this stuff so much.
This is a question I always ask, and generally the answer is usually the same, but I figured I'd ask anyways. Do you have any episodes you remember working on that particularly stick out to you of The Emperor's New School?
It's been some time, and it's like a blink of an eye,
Yeah.
Gosh, on that show, there was one challenge, and I kind of failed in a way, where the studio and the creators of the show were going back and forth with each other. The showrunners had run many shows, kind of knew the process of outsourced animation, and would get frustrated. So they would stage things simply. I kind of nickname it Peanut Staged, which is kind of like Charles Schultz Peanuts comic strip, where everything's just flat. Yeah. Even if they were to hold a plate, they'd want it held flat, and they didn't want any dimension, because I think they were tired of it not coming out the way they wanted, revisions. So they just said, let's just make it simple. Yeah. But then the studio would see it and go, no, this is based on the feature. We want it to have depth. We want it to look like staged cinematically. So then I got an assignment where I'm like, they're telling me, okay, Rob, they want it cinematically, so do it cinematically. I did it cinematically. And then they looked at the boards and they said, no, we want it flat like we want. And I'm like, who do I listen to? Yeah. And I was a bad boy. I didn't want to redo it, and I didn't do it, and I turned it in. And now that I'm older, I see that was very disrespectful. And now that I'm in a position where people work for me, had somebody done that to me, I would be very upset with them. And so years went by, and I did apologize to that director later. And I said, I was young and dumb, and I thought I knew better, and I shouldn't have done that. That was disrespectful. I'm very sorry. I hope you're going to accept my apology. And all was good. We've even gone to a hockey game together, and the guy's awesome. That's the kind of the experience that sticks out for me the most, more than an episode. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah, I got to, for my documentary, I got to interview Bob Scanaway, the executive producer, and he was really fun to talk to.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he had written the show, like when you pitch a show.
I've seen it.
He wrote it in Cusco's voice,
he
right?
sent it to me, and I used
really
some of it in the documentary.
Yeah, it's
nice.
Fun to read because you can hear David Spade in your head as you're reading it.
Ciarán, do you have? I'm trying to go back and forth between us to make it more interesting.
Yeah, no worries. You're good. At this point, I just kind of want to gush about some of the other credits that Robb has, because you mentioned, obviously growing up more with Looney Tunes than you did Disney. You were one of the animators on Looney Tunes Back in Action, which I have to say, underrated movie.
I think it's pretty good. It deserves. Yeah. That was
I
kind of
don't think I've seen that the whole way through, but I need to. But my favorite part from that movie is the part where Shaggy is berating Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, as a Scooby-Doo nut, it's a hilarious moment, especially because the whole if you goof on me in the sequel, I'm coming after you. And,
but
Scooby-Doo 2
makes
is
it
on
so
the way,
funny is it's a joke that feels more relevant now than it did back then.
Yeah, because Matthew is now voicing Shaggy full time.
Yeah, and also there's all these live actioning everything.
Yeah,
and I just.
Well, what's super fun about that shot, I remember that's my good friend, Jim Baker. He's one of my dear friends. Now we've known each other all these years. He got that shot. And, the whole thing is we're working for the animation directors, Eric Goldberg. I mean, come on, the guy that animated the Genie, one of the greatest animators that ever lived. And we're all going.
And he led the animation on Once Upon a Studio as well.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of the only original animators that's still there for 2D.
One of the greatest animators that has ever lived. He's fantastic. So we're all working for Eric. We're trying to make fluid movement, probably more fluid than the Looney Tunes actually were. When you watch them, they can be a little clunky in a beautiful, energetic way. We were probably making it maybe too polished, which is fine. But then the assignment for that Shaggy scene was, you got to make it like limited animation. You got to make it look cheap.
Yeah, you got to give it that Hanna-Barbera vibe. So
yeah, held cell and poses that just kind of go back and forth and evenly timed instead of being interestingly timed. And I remember, we were all laughing while he was working on it, and then he had to show Eric, and we were all kind of over his shoulder, and Eric went, "This looks awful." Approved, like that, because that's what we were going for. It was great. That scene's so fun. But yeah, that movie, I like it. I know a lot of people beat up on it. It's hard to translate the Looney Tunes characters into a long story like that.
It's definitely a movie that has much more of a following, a very more vocal cult following now than it did when it first came out. Because I see people talk about how much better that movie is than Space Jam all the time now.
To be completely honest, I'm on that side. I do enjoy Back in Action more than Space Jam, just because I grew up with it a little more than I did.
Space Jam's just a commercial.
It is just a commercial a little bit, yeah. It started as a commercial.
It did. But what's great is that, if you work on something that's quality, even if it doesn't find its audience right away, you have a chance to get them later. Because like I said earlier, Atlantis, the studio, was not happy with that movie. They were not behind that. And then years go by, and I go to Comic Cons now. I see Princess Kita cosplayers all the time, and Milo, and it seems like it has its, it found its audience because it is good. And same thing with Back in Action. And one thing that was, that was a painful time. That was right when we all got let go from Disney, and we'd all been together for such a long time. So funny that Eric goes over to be the director, and he hires us all. So really, when you watch Back in Action, it's pretty much animated by Disney. It's all of us, just we moved into a different building, but it's all the same people that were animating on all, Emperor's New Groove and all Hercules and Tarzan. It's the same animators basically.
Yeah, and also like you brought up like missing your shot at being on Lion King. You did get a chance to be part of Lion King 3 though, as an animator as well.
Or as we
Or
call it
Lion King
here,
1.5,
one and a
as it's
half.
called in the US.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is
There,
one
you
of my
know,
favorite of the direct-to-video sequels or cheap.
yeah, I had a fun take, a different take, and it was fun, right? The movie within the movie. And that was, me just trying to hold on. I love Disney. I love this company. It just celebrated its 100th anniversary on Monday.
Yeah.
And it really is.
Incidentally,
It's
Monday was also my mom's birthday, but she's not 100.
okay. And it's my mom's death day. That's a big day.
Oh,
And it was the day before my birthday. So
wow, something going on in the universe.
yeah.
But we all
yeah,
celebrated
it's a very odd week.
And of course it's time for reflection when you're celebrating 100 years of the company, and in 100 years it's going to go up and down and have its high points and low points, but really it's the company that made Disneyland. I love Disneyland and animation. It's my favorite company that's ever been created. I love this company. So that Lion King 1.5, this is after the heartbreak of all of us getting let go, 300, like some 300 of us getting let go that drew with the pencil. And, we all were going, some were going to The Simpsons, some were going into computer. We were all spreading out and not being with each other anymore. And I was lucky enough to go to, it was Disney Toon Studios. They were doing the sequels. And thank goodness somebody threw some work at me. It wasn't like steady work like the Disney feature gig was. It was like, we need help for 6 months, because they would animate those, at overseas studios.
Yeah, I think Lion King ones were done in Australia.
Australia. That's right. Yeah. And they were getting better and better with each movie. Their animation was getting really good. Yeah. But in LA, just to have a little bit of quality control, if there were scenes that were problematic or challenging, the crews there were maybe not as seasoned. They would have maybe 4 or 5 of us. And I was lucky to get that gig. But again, it was pretty short, just a few months. And then, after I think I had a good 9-year run at feature, not seeing a day of unemployment. And then it was it was a couple of years of 4 months here, 6 months there, 2 months here. And that's what that Lion King 1.5 was like. But I was happy to be on. It was fun.
Yeah.
I'm
certainly hoping that after Once Upon a Studio came out, I feel like everyone's pining for a bit of 2D animation again, just because it was just so nice to see everyone show up again. Even down to their little details, like the sort of scratchy era characters like Baloo and Mowgli all still having their line work in it. The commitment to the style of every film is the attention to detail is just brilliant.
I think the Tiana series, it's being done in Vancouver because they have a new Walt Disney Animation Studios studio there. Is going to be traditionally animated, which I mean, good, because the movie was.
And it better be.
Yeah.
And it's being animated by, people who are at least were trained by people who worked at it. It's done by feature animation, basically, but a different division of feature animation.
Yeah. I'll be curious how it comes out. Of course, I'm going to tune in. And always hoping to, this sounds corny. I have a lot of corny things that I think about, but when you're a kid, you believe in magic, and you grow up and you learn magic's not real. But to me, seeing a drawing that's alive, that's still like magic to me. A drawing that can move somebody emotionally, whether they laugh or cry, like the classic, that's what an entertainer wants to make you do, laugh or cry. A series of drawings that can make you that committed. And now we have YouTube. There's YouTube videos of dogs watching Mufasa die, and the dogs are getting moved by it.
Oh my god!
What? How amazing is that? That's a magic trick.
Yeah. Well, yeah, animate and that's why it's so important to me that people are doing these things. People, they're right now lots of problems going on with AI and people worrying about it. But people are what make these characters alive. The artists, the voice actors, the animators.
I do think there is something to tactile art,
they
where
put the humanity into it, and that's what makes it come to life.
I 100%
I don't think a
agree.
machine can do that.
And CGI, obviously CGI is awesome and you can do whatever you want, and the control you have and how you can refine as you go. But there is something, I mentioned that Industrial Light and Magic documentary. There is something cool about when you watch the old Star Wars and those are models that really explode.
Yes.
Or, that shot where R2 and 3PO are leaving out of the escape pod, and it's a model that was dropped into a black sheet. It's just gravity pulling. Like they had to problem solve, and you feel like you can reach in and grab it. And I think the audience has a connection to that human aspect to it.
I wonder if that inspired the Rise of the Resistance ending. If that scene inspired that, where you drop in.
I like to think. Yeah,
maybe, huh?
I still haven't been on that. I need to go when I get
Okay, it is pretty cool. Yeah,
I haven't been to Florida since I think 2014 last I checked. So a lot has changed.
Last I went to Florida was right before Star Wars Land first opened, and it didn't have that when it first opened. And it was only I was only visiting Animal Kingdom because we could only visit one park, and we wanted to do the new Avatar stuff because we hadn't been on it.
Yeah.
And the last time, and so far only time I've been to Disneyland was in January 2018.
Okay.
Which was really neat to get to go there and see how much smaller and different it was.
Small.
Getting to ride Indiana Jones.
I was going to say, we have the Indiana Jones adventure here, and that's my favorite ride. That thing's great. It feels like you're inside an Indiana Jones adventure, like you're really there. And that's what that Rise of the Resistance does too. It puts you in a Star Wars adventure.
Yeah.
That's
the Star Wars adventure that most people like, because people obviously have their opinions about the sequel trilogy, but I mean, enjoy whatever Star Wars you like. Just don't be mean to people about it.
I don't really care if it's a ride. If I'm in it to have fun, I don't care if it's based on something that's my preference or not. Honestly, as long as it's fun.
I think no matter how you feel about the Disney Star Wars, it's undeniable. The ride itself is great, whether you like the movies or not. The ride's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And, I was saying that the pillars of Disney, it was always like family, quality, innovation. And boy, that ride is innovative. That's, that's what makes the ride so great. It's new kind of stuff. It's a mixture of different technologies. It's really pretty incredible.
My favorite way to innovate, by just combining a bunch of things basically into a new thing.
Yeah.
I guess it's a transformative ride, I guess you could call it, in a way, because it takes the dark ride and the multiple motion simulators, but the pre-show is kind of a motion simulator, and also the drop at the end is part motion simulator, part drop tower.
Then there's some practical effects in there, and
they get you to get off the ride vehicle in the middle of the ride, which I find very fascinating.
Yeah. It's neat.
What else?
I'm sure you probably heard all the stories about the first incarnation of Emperor's New Groove, right?
Oh, yes.
Kingdom in the Sun.
Yeah. You can talk about it anyways. I'm always happy to hear about it again or more about it.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, if I can offer any kind of new perspective, I'm sure you've heard a lot about it, but just being there, we were all, even if you weren't on that movie, you got to go to the screenings. One thing that was awesome, and for me, who loves to learn, we all had a down shooter and a computer in our office, but it was also connected to a network, and you could go into any folder you wanted to, and I want to see what Glenn Keane's animating. I'll go into Glenn's folder, and then you could learn. So I was looking at all the folders on Emperor's New Groove, and then for the screening of Kingdom in the Sun, you could borrow the videotape, back when it's VHS. I want to borrow the video. I want to watch it, and so I watched it, and it's really, so different. And it's funny to think of in this day and age, but the voice on it was Owen Wilson. And I didn't know who he was yet. Now he's a super duper star, but I had not heard his voice. And at first listen, I thought, that's kind of an odd voice. I don't know if that's the best voice to animate to. And then look, he's Lightning McQueen.
And now he's a car. Yeah.
So it was a weird experience watching it. And then, the story was pretty much Prince and the Pauper, but
he does have a bit of a weird twang for peasant in the Inca Empire, but then again, the majority of the cast was white. So
Yeah.
Well, and then it's just like animation performances, it's like that, like the Disney book, The Illusion of Life. It's always exaggerating things.
Yeah.
If somebody's going to jump, they don't jump like a real person. They really leap, they really cushion. And the same goes for voice performance. If you were to speak like a regular actor, it comes across as kind of flat.
Yeah.
I've seen
Yes.
really great on-screen actors come into the booth and they give flat performance. And I'm talking like Disney gets big names. And I don't want to put anybody on the
well,
bust
I know
anybody.
that
Of course, yeah.
they were getting they weren't getting the performance they wanted out of David Spade and when they were doing Groove. So they told him they were filming him the entire time,
And then they got it. Yeah.
that's how they got him to actually
Smart.
act the way they wanted him to.
Yeah.
And I
think probably Owen probably did get better too.
Yeah.
But at least in the screening, I heard, everything was just kind of low and small, and it wasn't really big, and it wasn't like big performance. Yeah. It wasn't
things
like
work differently here in the Inca Empire.
Yeah. It was very kind of low key. But then Lightning, Loki,
because he's in
Two
Loki.
Loki references back to back. I love it.
But I think he probably learned from that, because then when he got Lightning McQueen, it is much more amped up performance.
Yeah, and I think when you're like a celebrity who isn't used to doing voice work, it's kind of, you don't exactly realize that, it's basically just acting. You're still acting, you're still performing. You aren't just you speaking into a microphone basically, or doing
ways. And there's a theatricality to it. It's not realism. Realism comes across, like I said, flat. It's got to be theatrical.
The greatest example of like how to really, and it's from a celebrity as well, of like really throwing yourself into a role and showing the acting, is Robin Williams as the genie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even him, at least this is just my opinion now. It's as good as anybody else's in the room. But Robin Williams, did a Ferngully beat Disney to the punch, and they used Robin Williams as the bat.
Yeah.
And yet it's not as good as the genie. Like they figured out Robin, and I think, I'm guessing here, even in movies, Robin's career wasn't exploding until, like, I think probably Good Morning Vietnam was a big one, because they let him know, like, okay, look, we got Robin Williams. Let him do his thing. Let him improvise, and then we'll just keep the cameras rolling. And I'm guessing that's what they figured out on Aladdin that they didn't on Ferngully. Like, just let the guy loose, and they have all that, audio, and then that's what's great. They reuse some of the audio on that, once upon a studio,
and they got
recently.
permission from his estate, which was the most important thing to me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I know that Robin Williams had a very rocky relationship with Disney, so
right. Yeah. A lot of that comes down to points and stuff, because when I was a kid, before Robin Williams, when Disney got big name actors, they were not probably in their prime anymore. Their prime money taking prime. So they'd get actors that you'd heard of, but they weren't like superstars at the time. And then they'd work for scale, a union scale. And then when they got Robin Williams, wow, like, but we got like somebody that's like in their prime, like they're at their top of their game. That was huge. And then the movie was big. And I think a lot of stars, it opened their eyes, like, oh, it's not a bad thing to do a Disney cartoon. It's kind of cool. So now Disney's swinging for the fences and trying to get like big names. So when we were on Hercules, all the artwork of Hades was drawn like Jack Nicholson. They were like, we're going to get Jack Nicholson. And he came to the studio with his little girl holding his hand. And the little girl was in a Snow White Halloween costume. So we're like, oh my God, he's going to do it. He's going to do it because he's got a daughter. But what it came down to, from my understanding, I don't know all the facts, but from my understanding, it was points. He had made so much money, more money off of Batman, off of points, than he did off of his salary. So he was like, I want points. And Disney was just like, I don't, we're not giving points. But
we don't do that here.
Yeah. So I'm guessing maybe that's probably where a lot of Robin Williams bumping heads with them, because he's, these are actors in their prime now.
The main issue was he had another movie competing with Aladdin at the time, Toys, which did not do well, and was not very well received. And he's part of his agreement with Disney to do the voice work in the movie was that they wouldn't put him front and center and put him in all the marketing and all the merchandise and stuff, and they went behind his back and did it. So that's why he wasn't in the TV series or Return of Jafar. they got him back, basically saying the same thing for saying they wouldn't do it again for King of Thieves, but then on the cover of King of Thieves it says the return of Robin Williams, so they did it again.
Yeah.
Oh man.
From then on, he only agreed to do educational stuff for Disney.
Oh, that's funny. I had never heard all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So have you been able to see a cut of Kingdom in the Sun? Because I know you're major Emperor's New Groove fans.
I've only seen the scenes that are online and in the sweat box, because I've seen the sweat box.
The sweat box, yeah, that thing.
I still need to see the sweat box because I just haven't gotten around to it.
It's currently on the Internet Archive, so
yeah, I have it saved. It's in my tab somewhere.
I think at this point, if I were Disney, I would have just given up because people are going to keep uploading it anyway.
Pretty much, yeah.
And everyone knows, like, it's like trying to like keep this thing a secret that everyone already knows. It's the secret lab, basically. Everyone knows about it already.
Right. Well, it's funny when you love a movie and that there's like two versions of it. You know, I love Superman. I'm a big Superman fan, and I grew up with those Christopher Reeve movies. And you always knew that they filmed those first two back to back as one big movie. But then they fired the director when the first one was completed. And he had almost, from what I read, like 75% of the second one shot. But then because of Union Directors Guild rules, the new director had to have more than 50% shot to get his screen credit. So they had to throw away a lot of Richard Donner footage. And I knew about this for decades, you know, and then they finally released it all like in 2006, I think, because of Superman Returns.
Yeah.
But you knew it was out there. It was kind of legendary. You'd see a still, or if you collected the little baseball cards, sometimes they had a still and you knew it existed.
Yeah.
So it's funny when you love a movie so much and to have like there's two different versions. I imagine that Kingdom in the Sun must be pretty intriguing to you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But boy, Kronk, you know, was not in that version.
Yeah, that is
Kronk
true.
is great. Eartha Kitt,
and it was the lesser for it.
One of my things is the trade-off is you give up that Eartha Kitt song, but you get Kronk, and also you get if you want to watch Kronk's New Groove in the Emperor's New School, she has songs in those, and you can listen to the song she did have that was cut still on the soundtrack, so it's not completely gone.
Yeah. You know? Dale Baer's animation on Yzma is fantastic.
Yeah, unfortunately, never got to interview him.
Oh, let me tell you, I just told a story about him this week and I want to share it because he's passed on and he's one of the sweetest guys one could ever meet, and humble. And for those listening that don't really know much about Dale, you know, he animated for Disney for many years, started his own studio, Bear Animation. I think he went through a separation or divorce and you know, financially had to come back to the studio. So he had all this history going through him, and then he was just beloved. Everyone loved him. And so now I'm at the studio for a few years. Now I'm animating, and I'd always loved Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Love that movie. I took a date to see it. And when I was old enough at that time where I'm like, I knew I wanted to be an animator. Oh my God, I have to be there now. Look at what they're doing. This is so cool. And so now I'm animating for a few years, and I thought, I want to watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit now that I've been doing it. Is the animation as good as I remember? Better. Like the more you know about animation, the better the animation is in that. And so I'm watching that, and I'm just astounded by how good it is. I was not at that level yet. And that scene with Mickey and Bugs, come on, iconic scene, right?
Yeah.
I'm watching it, and it's animated gorgeous. And I was thinking, well, they must have put two superstars on this is a big scene. These two stars together, they had to put top animators. So I went to work the next day, determined who I'm going to find out who animated these shots. And so I thought, well, if people would go, I don't know, maybe Mark Henn might have done it. He was young at the time. Mark goes, no, I don't know. It might have been Andreas Deja. He's kind of a Mickey guy.
Mark Henn, the famous animator from Full House. For those who don't know.
Oh yeah.
I said Mark Henn is famously known as animator in Full House.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah. He was in an episode of Full House where they went to Disney. And, you know, they went back when MGM Studios still had an animation studio there. And he was one of the animators there. But in the credits, it said Mark Henn as animator.
Oh, that's funny. Another sweetheart of a guy and super talent. But yeah, Mark did. So that wasn't the answer. They said maybe Andreas Deja. I went to Andreas. He's like, it's not me. But I think Dave Spafford might have animated Bugs. And then so Dale being one of the older animators, I went to Dale and I was winding up to ask the question by going, boy, that scene of Bugs and Mickey is really incredible. I'm about to ask, do you know who animated? And Dale just very humbly went, oh, thank you. Oh, so Dale he did Mickey Mouse. And then he gives me the anecdote of, yeah, so I'm animating Mickey and Dave Spafford's animating Bugs. And I was telling him, this whole movie's got to be on ones. We talked about that earlier in this interview, what ones means.
Yeah.
You can't do it on twos. It's got to be on ones because it matches the live action.
Live action.
But Dave was like, no, in this shot, he's not interacting with any. I'm going to do it on twos. Dale thought ahead and animated his on ones. And then as they turned in the scenes, okay, scene looks good, but it needs to be on ones. Spafford had to add in all these drawings that Dale was already prepared and knew what to do.
Yeah.
And Dale, gosh, his studio would help out. When he had his own studio, I guess they would take sequence. Disney, when the Renaissance was coming back up, they weren't fully staffed to do 2 movies yet. That's why I got hired, and kids like me. They would have to subcontract sequences out, and Dale's studio would take some from Lion King, did a couple sequences in Lion King. And then it stuck in my head. I wasn't even at the studio yet. There was, of all things, Pampers commercials, baby diapers, but it was little kids like Roger Rabbit style live action interacting with baby versions of Pluto and Mickey Mouse and Minnie, gorgeously animated. And I remember a kid snuggling up and holding Pluto, and Pluto was like licking them on the face or something.
I feel like I've heard of that before. Maybe it's on YouTube or something. I don't know.
You know what?
Probably
after we're done, I'm going to look for it because it was just gorgeous. And then I found out that was at Dale's studio too. That was probably Dale that animated that.
I got to interview for April Fool's Day. I like to do something that's not Emperor's New Groove, but it's tangentially related. And in the 2003 DVD of Roger Rabbit, on the menu, Cusco appears at one point. So for the Roger Rabbit, and I was just going to do a normal review of it, but then I decided I should get a special guest. So I got Gary K. Wolf and interviewed him.
Oh, right.
But it was like being on the, I think on the set at the time, because I think they brought him on the set to do the movie.
Yeah.
And working with all the people. So
love that movie.
Yeah.
Well, so then you got Dale's animation. And then the voice, come on. Why did they not get Eartha Kitt to do like a million voices? What a voice for animation, huh? That unique sound. What a great character, huh?
I do think that there must have been some talk, both behind the scenes of Kronk's New Groove and the Emperor's New School, about trying to compensate for her not singing in Groove.
Yeah.
It's like, we need to get Eartha Kitt to sing at some point.
Know that her main song in the TV show was written by Randy Rogel, who did a lot. I think that's his name. Did a lot of songs for Tiny Toons and Animaniacs.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But wow, rounding out a great cast, right? Because David Spade's so funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
Patrick Warburton, hilarious. Come on. I think my favorite joke is him, right? With the Kronk, the drinks. Oh yeah, the drinks. Right.
The poison for Cusco.
I still I would like to interview him at some point, but I know, first of all, right now is probably not a good time because there's an actual strike going on with actors. But
Sure.
Also, he's very busy, so it's difficult to get a hold of him because I do know him. Like we follow each other on Twitter and everything. So yeah, and I actually did
wonderful.
Briefly get to meet him at a con and fist bump him, so that was cool.
Yeah, fantastic.
He did.
It's great. I mean, when I grew up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, growing up, we mentioned Bugs Bunny. I think I was probably drawn more to Bugs Bunny than Disney. Disney had lush, beautiful movement. As a kid, maybe the movies even seemed a little slowly paced and long for me. Bugs Bunny was nice and short and super funny. It was hard for, the Disney humor was not edgy humor.
Yeah,
it was very safe humor. Bugs could be a little edgy.
I also think the earlier you go back into the Disney movies, the more slow paced they feel. Like the very beginning, I don't think they quite knew how to do a feature. Like Snow White's a great movie. It set the stage for feature 2D animation. But when I watch it, it doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like a series of short, sort of tangentially connected to this overlapping thing.
A lot of Disney movies feel that way for me. Yeah, this is like, oh, we're just doing business here. We're not moving the plot. It's just business.
Alice in Wonderland, perfect example.
However, is
the pace.
a character does something that leads to the next thing that happens in the story, and so on.
Yeah. And
It's
the pacing is
all
great.
flowing perfectly. So I
And
like
funny
a
and
lot of people
edgy.
say it's a movie that
Mm.
doesn't focus that much on the plot, but I think no, I think the plot's just super simple, but the story
Yeah.
structure is so tightly knit that
Yeah.
it's like it's a master class in how to do a story, basically.
Yeah.
Every character has to drive something in the plot or the theme and connect back to the story.
And then having
Yeah.
a cynical character is funny. You know, like one of my favorite Bugs Bunny shorts is 8-Ball Bunny, because through the short, Bugs gets saddled with a little penguin that he promised to take him to the South Pole, and then realizes what he got into. And Bugs is grumpy and annoyed the whole time, and he can get batted eyes. And when they go through the Panama Canal, 25 cents to go through this thing? We'll walk first. Like, I love that he can get annoyed, and that's so human. And Disney doesn't really go that way most of the time. But like letting David Spade be a cynical, funny character, Eartha Kitt is cynical and funny. It's funny in an edgier way than most Disney fare.
Yeah, and with Eartha Kitt, like, I think the villains in general get to be more cynical and edgy than the heroes do. And I think Emperor's New Groove is a movie where pretty much everyone gets to have their moment. And, the main character, Cusco practically starts the film basically about the same as Yzma. So he's basically have a movie that starts off with a villain protagonist that has to learn to not be such a jerk.
It all sets up for a really nice emotional payoff at the end, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's great stuff. And it kind of like maybe what we were saying about, like movies and animation finally figured out, just let Robin Williams do his thing. Yeah. I think it was just let David Spade be David Spade. That's the jerky guy that he is on Saturday Night Live, and let him do it. It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this obsession you have with Emperor's New Groove, it sounds like it extends to the sequels too.
Yeah. Especially the TV series.
And all right.
Yeah.
Gosh, I feel like I let you down not knowing my favorite one. Is there your favorite episode?
I don't know. There were 52 of them, so it's kind of
hard to narrow them down. I do remember there was one episode, where Kronk was like a hall monitor or something for the school, and he ended up firing the animators at one point. And I'm just like, what happened to the backgrounds? Oh yeah, we fired the animators, so we have no color.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah,
I forgot the name of the episode, but it's like,
my favorite character in the TV show, just because I kind of had a crush on her, especially as a teenager, was Melina, who's not in the movie. So that's why I'm a big fan of the TV series.
Yeah, I do remember drawing Melina. Yeah, that was a fun character. And that breaking the fourth wall is great, isn't it? And that's kind of what makes Bugs Bunny so funny. He can talk to camera, and it's kind of taking a page of Buster Keaton. And I don't know, from your listeners, Buster Keaton from the silent era, when they're still kind of figuring out motion pictures, would be experimental and do the funniest things, like if he's getting chased by police officers and he just runs barely off camera, the police officers come into camera and they don't know where he is. They can't see him because the audience can't see him. And then when they move on, he can come back in. And all that stuff is so funny. And then they were picking up on that with Bugs Bunny. And then, Bob Hope would do that in his movies, talk to camera, and I eat that stuff up. I love it. I love it even when Superman in the Fleischer cartoons, Superman saves the day, but in the little recap at the end, Lois Lane has to dress down Clark Kent and go, well, good thing there's a Superman around here, Clark, because if it was guys like you, Metropolis would be a mess. And then Superman going, good thing there is a Superman, Lois. And then, winking at the camera. I just love
wink,
that
wink,
stuff.
Nudge, nudge.
Yeah, we're in on the secret.
My friend Dave does a lot of riffs on those old Fleischer cartoons that he does. Oftentimes they'll have streams where he and other YouTubers will come up with jokes, including sometimes I've contributed to, where he riffs on the Fleischer cartoons because they're public domain, so they're easy to get to do riffs.
No content ID worries. So
Wow. I
we in the clear.
I realize that. Wow. It does make sense. Every little small video store was putting those out for, because they could, I guess.
I remember, I think my dad has or had like a Superman collection that had like all the movies through Superman Returns, but it also had those on it, I think.
That's right. I
And I
got
think
that
I had a
collection.
DVD that a couple DVDs that were just public domain cartoons because they're easy to put out and sell.
Yeah,
And that included
yeah.
some of those. I
Wow,
think some of the
interesting.
Mighty Mouse ones were public domain, which seems
Yeah.
wrong. It seems like it can't be right to me, but
That's weird. And maybe this is why those Fleischer Supermans were in public domain. For me as a kid here in Los Angeles, another thing that fueled my love for animation, we had the greatest 3 hours on Sunday mornings, hosted by Tom Hatton, who was a character actor, would show Fleischer Popeye cartoons, and then a weird mix of sometimes there'd be Tennessee Tuxedo, Tom Slick, and Georgia the Jungles were mixed in, but it was mainly
Jay Ward cartoons.
yeah, it was mainly the Fleischer
Nice.
Popeyes, and then in between cartoons, you'd get Tom Hatton was on a little set that looked like he was at a bay, and he would draw. And you could even send in a scribble, and if Tom Hatton picked your scribble, he would put it on his drawing board and turn it into a drawing. It was just the greatest show. I loved it.
Yeah.
But
Oh, nice.
through all that time, they did not show the Superman cartoons. I didn't know they existed. My whole childhood, I didn't know. I think they were kind of just forgotten, and maybe that's why they fell into public domain. Nobody was protecting the rights.
Yeah.
And for me, I think I was 20. I was like 20 years old, going to animation festivals like Spike and Mike Twisted Festival of Animation. And I would go, and then they'd show the program, and the first one was Superman. And I already loved Superman. I'm like, what is this? And they showed the Bulleteers, the very first one, and my eyes popped out of my head like a Tex Avery. And they're so gorgeous. Oh my God, where have these things been my whole life? I think for a lot of people my generation, we didn't even know about them. And then I went to the comic book conventions looking for a bootleg to get them. Like, oh, how many did they make? Oh, they made 15. They made 17. Oh, some of them are famous studios. Some of them are Fleischer. Those things are awesome, but they were hidden for a long time.
Yeah.
Some of the most beautiful animated shorts ever made. And you probably heard the history too. They're made on a budget that's like 3 times what a Popeye cost, because
I would imagine so, having seen them. Yeah.
From what I read, and who knows from what you read, but I read Superman was so brand new, although the comics, blew up.
Yeah.
Paramount wanted those cartoons to go in front of Paramount Movies. Paramount didn't have their animation studio. They had to contract somebody. So when they contracted the Fleischers were like, this guy in a tights and a cape. What? We have our own Popeyes that we would rather do, but they didn't want to outright turn it down. So they just said, well, these are kind of cost prohibitive. They'd be very expensive. They'd be probably like 3 times the amount of a Popeye. And to their astonishment, Paramount agreed. So those things are made on huge budgets. And that's the thing about really good work. Like we were saying, it'll find an audience.
Yeah.
Really good work. And that's one thing that's wonderful about this art form of traditional animation. If it's done really, really high, it doesn't age. Like CG will age because texture, lighting will adapt. But 2D animation, Pinocchio is 80 years old, and still you cannot animate 2D better than Pinocchio. Like it's just, it cannot be beaten 80 years later. And those Fleischers, all these years later, you can't really do it better than that. It's just, they're done so well.
Yeah.
Compared to like, if you go back to like Toy Story today, like, Disney was putting out a bunch of like their films, like
even Frozen, the first Frozen, like I watched it. I think I watched it all the way back in like shortly before, around the time the sequel was coming out, and it looked like a video game.
Yeah, it's already aged.
Yeah.
And
like, what is it? Because Disney was putting out a bunch of their films for like the 100th anniversary, like for re-releases, which I think is what they should be doing instead of the live action remakes, personally. But
I agree.
Watching Toy Story on the big screen again, it's like, I mean, it was 95, but like, Jesus, compared to like how a Toy Story 4 looks, it's like night and day practically.
Especially the humans, right? And the dog.
Yeah.
I think
all the kids are
leeway.
All of the kids are just clones of Andy.
Yeah,
I never noticed that as a kid.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
What holds up best about the Toy Story movies definitely is more the writing than the animation.
Yeah. What a great story. I mean, it was heartbreaking. I told you when we saw it, we knew our days were numbered, but you got to know that it had to be a deliberate idea. We're making our first movie with new technology. What is our movie going to be about? Oh, it'll be about the new high-tech toy. that is eclipsing the old favorite.
And also
It's the
because
perfect.
because our CGI still looks plastic, so we need to have as much of the characters be plastic as possible.
Which is smart too. Yeah. Their whole first run of like their first 5 or 6 movies were just like, what do kids like? They like cars, they like bugs, they like toys. Like they pick the perfect
And monsters.
things and monsters. They really set themselves up for success with those concepts.
Yeah, and they kept up until I think the Incredibles was their first one that really was entirely focusing on humans. I think each one progressively I think had more humans in it building up to that. Like Toy Story, Bug's Life didn't have any humans in it. They exist, they were implied to exist, but you didn't see them. But by Toy Story 2, you had Al, and then Monsters Inc. you had Boo. Then Finding Nemo comes out. There's a couple characters in that.
And what really struck me about Incredibles is like they stylized them like 2D designs, where the competition, DreamWorks, was trying to make them look too realistic.
Yeah,
and it's like, no, you're blowing it there. And then when finally the Incredibles like said, no, we're going to design them like 2D designs, then everybody started following. That line of thought.
Yeah, when you go back and watch Shrek, the human characters do look very uncanny.
They do.
Yeah. Like it's weird looking at Fiona in that first film. It's like she's so hyper realistic.
She looks so much better as an ogre.
2000s, like, CGI, of course.
She looks so much better when she turns into the ogre than she did as a human.
Right. Yeah. Would you ever want to see okay, so now you mentioned the Disney live action remakes. We were all worried when this new technology came out. All the rumors in the hallways were like, Michael Eisner, who was running the company at the time, he's going to remake all of the Disney classics as CG. That's what we thought was going to happen. We weren't even thinking live action. We thought, they're going to do Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but it's going to be done in CG now. Would you even have any interest in a Cusco CG
only if
rendered?
It was the one I came up with, which was more of a Roger Rabbit type thing than an actual
Yeah,
I bet. And then Rescue Rangers came out and was vaguely similar, and I was like, oh man, if I ever worked at Disney and came up with this idea, would people criticize it for being too similar to Rescue Rangers? Except probably better.
Yeah, that's tough though, right? Because ideas are. I mean, some people think how many stories are there? There's only, some people say there's only like 10 or so.
Yeah.
I guess it's how you execute it, but it's like, that will kill. But sometimes maybe that's an encouragement that you were onto something.
Yeah.
I've been animating my own guy, Carman, the road rage antihero, and I've been doing it for years. I started it, I think, back in 2002, and the first logo that I made for Carman was that Magneto font because it looked like old car font. And then Cars comes out and they use the font. I'm like, but maybe it shows that you're onto something. Your line of thinking was good. I also was going to give Carman a sidekick. I was going to make this kid that was going to be a wannabe Robin go, hey, I want to follow you on your adventures. And Carman was going to be like, look, kid, I'm a road rage antihero. I'm not a superhero. And then when I saw the trailer for Incredibles and and Incrediboy was wanting to be his ward, I'm like, I felt nauseous. I felt like I got punched in the stomach.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just reassuring that, hey, your line of thinking, you're onto something.
And it's
great minds think alike.
Execution always also is what makes the real difference.
That's right.
But like the idea I came up with was, well, the movie's about, I'm going to spoil it because I don't think I'm going to end up making it any. I'm making a fan film, but it's not going to be a hybrid because that's way too out of my league for a fan film. But the plot is Disney's remaking The Emperor's New Groove, and Cusco wants to supervise it, the animated Cusco. So
I would love that.
Real world, and
that
then
is funny.
The twist at the end is that it turns out that the CEO or whoever's in charge of the remakes, because I know the CEO is actually in charge of the remakes, was actually Yzma and Judge Doom like disguised the whole time.
Nice.
And every single remake up to this point, obviously we know the real reason they do remakes is for money, but in this universe, every remake up to this point was part of eventually leading to the Emperor's New Groove remake, where she would rewrite the ending where she wins.
Oh, that's a
clever way of doing it.
That's a fantastic idea. I wish they would do it.
Pitch that to Disney. I'm sure they'll buy it.
Well,
they love meta commentary.
Submissions, but
Oh, I love the idea.
All right. Do you have any more questions, Ciarán?
I think out of the main ones I had listed, that's pretty much everything. I just want to be able to gush about
Oh,
animation
go
because
ahead.
it's like just like as someone who's like grown up with like obviously the Disneys and the Pixars and the DreamWorks, like you know, it's just I feel like this medium has like so much like I don't even know how to describe it. I'm like but just like there's so much you can do with it like that can't be
Yeah.
done in live action.
Yeah.
Like you can put the camera anywhere you want. You can like have like these beyond what like we conceive as reality in terms of like characters.
Like,
And
mhm.
like I think one of the like best things when it comes to like animators is being able to act through your animation, like especially like the work on like Tantor, not Tantor, sorry,
Sure.
I'm getting mixed up with characters, Kerchak and Tarzan. Like there's little subtleties to like how his facial animation works.
Yeah.
Like I cite like the scene when they've just after taken out Sabor and Tarzan's looking for that validation that he's been searching for his entire life. And you can just see like the conflict in his face, him like looking down constantly like, I don't want to admit that like he's did a good job, but like he did just save the
Well done,
family.
Sun
And
Guy. That's a TV tropes.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Um,
another thing that's terrific, like you said, this art form in Tarzan, they all gave us zoo passes. There's a zoo that's pretty close to the studio, so they gave us passes, and they said, "Hey, while the story's being worked on, go to the zoo, study them, draw them, get them
Yeah.
figured out." And one
and
of
that's
the
what the
things
whole
that,
movie is about, basically.
yeah, and then what's fun about animation now is that we found out with the great weight that they have on them that they don't have tendons the same way we do. Their fingers, they'll bend all the way. Like they'll bend almost. What do you call
Wow.
it when it bends contrary to the hyper? They
Double
hyperextend.
jointed or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's just how big they are and how they work. But humans don't have that. But we're animators. So when
Yeah.
you watch Tarzan, Tarzan's fingers move like apes' fingers because we
Yeah.
can do it in animation. That wouldn't work in the live action version.
Yeah.
But
Fun
that's part
fact
of the fun.
about Kerchak, Nick Ranieri was offered to animate him. It was between Kerchak, Doppler, and Cusco, and I think it was Peter Schneider who suggested he do Cusco because he's the star. And of course, he didn't want to do Kerchak because Nick Ranieri prefers to do more silly characters.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and Doppler wasn't. Peter Schneider basically said Doppler's not really that big a part. Cusco's the star. You should take him. So that's how Nick Ranieri ended up being supervising animator on Cusco.
Wow, and he killed it. It's awesome. It's such good work and original, like edgy acting. There's a scene that he did, like to be critical of Disney. We're all such in this rich tradition. We love it. It can get a little bit
Formulaic.
The snake, yeah, the snake eating its own tail.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking at what Disney did for acting choices. Oh, what did Milk Call do, or what did all the traditional the Disney heroes? But I saw Nick did acting choices that were outside of that box. And one of my favorite ones, I think he threw a rock or something and it hit Cusco in the head, and he did one of those.
Yeah, he throws the rock at Patra that for some reason on Disney Plus they turn into an acorn.
He censored that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
I
then he
didn't
said,
know that.
Someone's throwing stuff. You're gonna build
Yeah,
fire.
and that expression he did was very like out of the box Disney. It was very original and edgy. Like Nick's terrific animator, and what a great match for him.
Yep. And it was him and Tony Bancroft. I watched Once Upon a Studio with both of them over Zoom for the last episode of this podcast.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was really neat because I had never actually watched something with an animator who worked on it. That was really cool.
Surreal, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was Nick's first time seeing the full thing too.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Had they asked him, did he draw the Hades in there?
He drew Hades and he did Cusco and Miko.
Oh,
I think he probably did. I think he might have done Oswald because Oswald bumps into Cusco.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And then they had the archival No Touchy that they lifted from the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
And he said in the interview, the review that was all, but we were talking about making it too. He said that he had to figure out how to do the No Touchy thing with the llama Cusco, because in the movie when he says that line, he's a human, but in this he's a llama.
Right. And
And
the
he does
hooves.
this
Yeah.
with his hands, but he's a
That's
llama, so he
right.
has to do it with his hooves, and it has to look different.
Yeah, that is a challenge. That's great. Oh, that's fun to know.
These are the things that animators have to think about. Like, when you're on set, like shooting a film, like the actors just kind of like do the things, but like it's no, like the animators have to work out like how does this character move? How would they like gesture in certain ways? And that's like part of the artistry that I love about it. It's like trying to like showcase the personality of that character through their movement, as opposed to like just getting an actor and just like having the director be like, do this, do that. It's like it's very like it's much different.
Yeah,
And
studying the movements half the fun. Yeah, figuring it out and learning it. Yeah.
Especially when they try and incorporate the actors' mannerisms, like in the recording booth, into their actual like animated performances and all that.
Yeah, I love that. Gosh, working on Milo Thatch from Atlantis, I got to be on that character, and I am a huge Back to the Future fan. So, and then they would show us footage of Michael J. Fox as he was recording, and he's so animated and so expressive. His acting is big. That's one of the reasons why Back to the Future is so fun. The performance, Doc, what are we gonna do? It's like really big and amped, and so he's just built for animation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to plug things. Do you want to plug anything first, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, like we said, we got to do our stuff in our garages, and the next cool thing, and corporate stuff is cool, and I love the support and the exposure, but with it comes compromise, sometimes not getting your way, sometimes arguing, and it's important to have stuff that reminds us why we love this art form. So I'm continuing on my own time. Unfortunately, I fell in love with an art form that takes forever to produce. But I'm animating Carman, the road rage anti-hero, when I can. It's a little edgier than like a Disney thing. It's a guy that can get angry in his car. And I'm teaming up with a partner from England named Des Taylor, and we're making a comic book, Eva Strongbird and the Marine. And to me, I told Des, I'm an animator. I'm a filmmaker. The comic book, this is the decision I made as a kid when I saw Superman comics and I liked them, but no, it needs to be animation. I've recorded voices for Eva Strongbird and the Marine, and I'm starting to build an animatic. And I'm when we're done here, I'm going to start animating. I'm in the middle of animating a shot for it.
Oh,
so
nice.
I hope to put these things out, inspire other artists, connect with me, hit me up on Instagram, hit me up on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. My favorite thing about all these things is connecting with other artists. Through this, I've gotten people that I've met composers to do music on these things. We should all work together and make the cool stuff that is maybe edgier and different from what the corporate is giving us. So yeah, please look me up and please do what you can to support and connect. And thanks for having me on, you guys. It was a pleasure talking to you. This stuff's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it was an absolute pleasure to be a part of this as
do
well.
you have anything to plug?
Well, I've got a YouTube channel, That Irish Geek. Not really much on there currently. I do plan on talking about some video games, some movies, some TV shows, some animation, of course. Right now, I guess the main thing I would plug from there is my documentary short film House of Pixels, which is about some of the history that Ireland has with the video games industry and these two brothers who were trying to make a museum for it. Other than that, I've also made appearances on the Geekly YouTube channel. That's GEEKILY, where I was a part of a little like podcast sort of retrospective series called The Road to TMNT Mutant Mayhem, where we just talked about every Ninja Turtles movie in the lead up to Mutant Mayhem. And we also do live streams on there occasionally. And I will also be a part of his upcoming fan project, which is a fan animated Ninja Turtle series, The TMNT, where I'm going to be voicing Casey Jones, the guy in the hockey mask. So that's going to be a ton of fun. I'm looking forward to that.
That's great. Yeah. I love it.
I have lots of stuff that I could plug, but most of that is pre-recorded. But I'm going to use the time to plug what I'm working on now, which is an Emperor's New Groove fan film that basically could be described as part sequel to the Emperor's New Groove, part unofficial lost pilot for the Emperor's New School, and part John Hughes movie.
Nice.
That's great. That
And
sounds
that is called
wonderful.
The Emperor's New School, the movie. It's a fan film. I don't know when it will be done because these things take time, but I'm working on it now.
I love
So
it.
yeah,
Well, let's all keep in touch. I'll keep tabs on you guys and see how it progresses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, pleasure meeting you, gentlemen.
you too.
Yeah.
Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for being patient with me. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Took a while to get back. It just time, you know, to get